There are four types of ionizing radiation: alpha, beta, neutrons, and electromagnetic waves such as gamma and X-rays. They differ in mass, energy, and how deeply they penetrate people and objects. Alpha particles, consist of 2 protons and 2 neutrons, and they have heaviest type of the ionizing radiation particle. They have many of the naturally occurring radioactive materials in the Earth, like uranium and thorium, emit alpha particles. The most known alpha emitter is radon in our homes. The another one, beta particles, have a small mass and a negative charge. Tritium, which is proposed by cosmic radiation in the atmosphere and exists all around us, emits beta radiation. The other one is neutrons. The neutron, doesn't have any charge, and it's present in the nucleus of an atom. Neutrons are commonly seen, uranium atom splits or fission in nuclear reactor. If it wasn't for the neutrons, you wouldn't be able to sustain the nuclear reaction used to generate power. The last kind of ionizing radiation, X-rays and gamma rays, it's kind of electromagnetic radiation. And they are probably the most familiar type of the radiation because they are usually frequently used in medical treatments. Unlike the other kinds, there is no mass or charge. The amount of energy can range from very low, for example, like dental X-ray, or to high levels, for example, seen in radiators used to sterilize medical equipment. Ionizing radiation enters our lives a variety of ways. It arises from natural processes such as decay of uranium in the earth and from artificial procedures like use of X-ray in medicine. So we can classify radiation as natural or artificial according to its origin. Natural sources include cosmic rays, gamma rays from the Earth, radon decay products in the air, and various radionuclides found naturally in food and drink. Artificial sources include medical X-ray, fallout from testing nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, discharge of radioactive waste from the nuclear industry, industrial gamma rays, or some consumer products. The annual dose averaged over the population of the world is about 2.8 millisievert in total. Sources of ionizing radiation from natural sources, with about half coming from radon decay products. It's important for us. Radon is very important for us. Medical exposure of patients accounts 14% of total, whereas the other artificial sources, such as the fallout, consumer products, discharge from the nuclear industry, account for less than just 1% of total value. After looking types and sources of radiation, next question: what ways can be exposed this ionizing radiation? There are 2 ways: internal and external exposure. External exposure occurs when the radiation source is outside the body. This can be from radioactive materials handled in hot lab, sealed sources used in radiography, or even patients who have been administered radiopharmaceuticals. External exposure can be whole body exposure, such as standing near the unshielded gamma emitter, or local exposure, such as hand exposure during the syringe handling, or due to the surface contamination, where the radioactive materials deposit on the skin or clothing. Internal exposure occurs when radioactive materials enter the body through which ways? Inhalation, absorption, or ingestion. Inhalation, for example, aerosols, for example, some iodine 131, or some ingestion, contaminated food or water or hands, and absorption through wounds and cuts. Once inside, these materials distribute through systemic circulation and may target specific organs. For example, iodine 131 targets is straight. So for cesium is to muscle. The resulting radiation dose depends on not just on energy and activity, but also on biological half-life and organ retention. While external exposure often be controlled with barriers, internal exposure is more difficult to detect and manage, unfortunately. That's why we must combine physical protection and strict hygiene, contamination control, and personal monitoring protocols. Always remember, radiation exposure not only about where the source is, it's also about where it can go and how long it stays there. We have three main principles for radiation protection: time, distance, and shielding. These are universally accepted concepts that guys ask, minimizing the radiation protection, minimizing exposure to radiation. Time is the simplest principle. Reduce the amount of time you spend near the source. The less time you are exposed, the lower your cumulative dose. The other principle is distance. Radiation intensity decrease with the inverse square law. So double your distance from a point source, your exposure decreases by a factor of 4. So we should always maximize our distance from the radioactive source. Shielding, when time and distance are limited in your research or in your study, shielding is your best defense. We use variety of materials depending on radiation type, for lead for gamma and X-rays, or acrylic or plastic for beta particles. Shielded syringe carriers, L blocks, leaded glass windows, and room barriers are just a few examples for shielding. Together, these principles form the basis of ALARA principle. It means keeping radiation doses as low as reasonably achievable. This is a patient. He is receiving iodine 131 therapy. When the therapy, he becomes a temporary source of radiation. So radiation dose increases when you get close to the patient. For example, at a half meter, the dose rate is about 0.5 millisievert per hour. The dose, while you at 2 meters, it drops only 0.03 millisievert per hour. So this shows that the distance is such an important factor in radiation protection. By just standing further away, we can greatly reduce our exposure. In radiation protection, it's essential to understand the devices for detecting and measuring radiation. It's just a summary for these detectors. Each has a unique capabilities. One of them is GM, Geiger-Müller counters, are widely used for rapid detection of ionizing particles such as alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Although they are sensitive and provide quick feedback, but they are not ideal for the accurate dose measurements for GM detectors. Scintillation detectors work by converting radiation into the light, which is amplified and measured. These detectors are highly sensitive, are often used in spectroscopy and environmental monitoring. Ionizing chamber offer precise dose assessment. They measure the electrical charge created by ionizing radiation in gas-filled chamber, making them suitable for high dose or clinical application. It's important as ionizing chamber. And finally, we have personal dosimeters also, which include TLD, thermoluminescent dosimeter, OSL dosimeters, or film beds, or electronic dose monitor. These are worn by workers in radiation areas to track cumulative dose over time, ensuring safety limits are not exceeded. We said that radiation can be measured using this radiation, but the values we obtain from these measurements are meaningless without units. So this slide summarizes the four fundamental concepts and units used in radiation measurements. This is often acronyms READ. R is radioactivity. This refers to the rate which radioactive materials releases radiation. The SI unit is becquerel, which represents 1 disintegration per second. The older unit is Curie. E is the exposure. This measures amount of ionizing radiation traveling through the air. SI unit is coulomb per kilogram. Older unit is Röntgen. Absorbed dose tells us how much radiation energy is absorbed by person or objects. The SI unit is the grade and it's equivalent to 1 joule per kilogram. The traditional unit is Rads. And the dose equivalence, this is the perhaps most relevant in radiation protection because it accounts for both the absorbed dose and the biological effects of different types of radiation. The SI unit is sievert and the traditional units is RAM. We mentioned about 3 rules: time, distance, and shielding. When your time and distance are limited, it's your best defense is shielding. We said that. We said that before, alpha particles are relatively heavy and carry a positive charge. They are easily stopped by a sheet of paper, even the outer dead layer of human skin. That's why they are not a significant external hazard. However, if you inhale or ingested, alpha emitters can be highly damaging due to their high ionizing potential. Beta particles are smaller and more penetrating than the alpha particles, but still manageable. Plastic, acrylic, or even thin aluminum sheet are effective shields. But in here, it's important not to use dense material like lead for high energy beta particles because of producing Bremsstrahlung radiation. Gamma rays and X-rays are highly penetrating and require dense materials for shielding, like lead, steel, or concrete for effective shielding. These are most common types encountered in nuclear medicine, especially after patient injection. This is why not hot labs, storage areas, and control rooms are shielded with lead-lined walls and windows. Neutrons are uncharged, and so they are extremely penetrating. They require hydrogen-rich materials, for example, water, paraffin wax, or polyethylene. While neutron radiation is not common in diagnostic nuclear medicine, it becomes relevant in certain research and radiotherapy settings. In practice, shielding strategies are based on the type and energy of emitted radiation. Personal protective equipment, PPE, serve as the first physical barrier between the worker and the radioactive contamination or exposure. While time and distance and shielding reduce those, PPE directly protects the body from the external contamination. The main types of personal protective equipment in nuclear medicine, gloves, lab coats, and goggles, are the standard protective apparel. Gloves prevent contamination during preparation, injection, or waste handling. lab coats protect clothing and skin from potential splashes or spills. Eye protection is essential when working with volatile radionuclides. The other one is dosimeter beds. Dosimeter beds are not protective in physical sense, but they are a vital part of occupational exposure monitoring. Whole body dosimeters are typically worn by the chest or collar, while the ring badges are used during the manual handling of radiopharmaceutical to monitor extremity dose. Tongs and shielded transport containers allow workers to maximize distance from the sources. Long-handled forceps reduce hand exposure when manipulating vials, syringes, or radioactive materials. To minimize contamination and radiation exposure, facility layout must be appropriate. So how do you do this? How do you do workplace design? Radiation protection is not just about what we wear or how we handle sources. It begins smart workplace design. And efficiently designed nuclear medicine departments minimizes exposure, risks, prevents contamination, and ensures regulatory compliance. Ventilation and air monitoring. Proper ventilation is critical, especially when working with volatile radionuclides like iodine-131. Fume hoods or laminar flow cabins should be used to contain aerosols. Air monitoring system, both rail and periodic, are required to detect radioactive gases and particles in the environment. This is particularly important in radiopharmacy and waste handling areas. The other important element is shielded storage waste rooms. Radiopharmaceuticals must be stored in lead-line cabinets or shielded safes to protect staff from the background exposure. Similarly, radioactive waste, even solids or liquid or biological, must be segregated and stored in clearly labeled shielded containers. Storage room should be separate from clinical and administrative areas, must have restricted access. Hot areas are, hot labs. Hot areas are zones where radioactive materials are handled, such as radiopharmacy, injection room, or imaging room. Cold areas are offices, waiting room, patient waiting room, or reporting station, where no radioactive materials should be present. These are cold areas. A clear and separation between these areas, between mistakenly spread of contamination, and simplifies cleaning and monitoring protocols. Radiation protection is a global concern that requires coordinated international effort to ensure the safe of use ionizing radiation in medicine industry or any research. Several key organizations guide this effort through recommendation, standards, and legal frameworks. For example, ICRP, the International Commission on Radiological Protection, it's founded in 1928, and the ICRP is independent and non-governmental organization that develops and publishes guidance on all aspects of ionizing radiation. ICRP does not create laws, but its recommendations are considered the scientific gold standards and serve as a foundation of national and international regulations. The key concepts, for example, ALARA, safety dose limits, and occupational exposure comes from ICRP reports. The other one is EIA, International Atomic Agency. EIA is United Nations agency. It's responsible for promoting safe, secure, and peaceful nuclear technologies. Unlike the ICRP, EIA publishes binding safety standards and supports countries in their implementation. The role of UNSECURE is to study and report on the health impacts of radiation worldwide. It conducts audits, training programs, and peer review of radiation safety infrastructures through programs like radiation safety standards and radiation protection of patients. National regulatory bodies. Each country is responsible for translating these standards into enforceable laws. In every country, there are institutions responsible for this issue. For example, in United States, NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission; in UK, Office of Nuclear Regulation; in Türkiye, NDK, Nükleer Düzenleme Kurulu. These national bodies license facilities, enforce compliance, and investigate radiation incidents. Together, these organizations form a multi-layered safety net. From global recommendations to local enforcement, they ensure radiation protection is consistent, science-based, and continuously evolving. You know, the Chernobyl, it's what happens in Chernobyl. It took place in April 1986 in Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. During the late nights, you know, the test on reactor 4. Design flaws and also human mistakes combined, and a massive explosion was happened. The accident released a huge amount of radioactive materials into the atmosphere, spreading across much of Europe. Several plant workers and first responders died within weeks due to the acute radiation syndrome. In the long term, the case of thyroid cancer and other related radiation health problems are increased. The Chernobyl disaster highlighted the critical importance of the strong safety culture, better reactor design. It's the millennium of this. And above all, transparent communication during nuclear emergencies. Now, let's shift to practice. It's an exposure scenario. A radiographer was performing a non-destructive testing using a gamma source, for example, like iridium 192 or cobalt 60. And he's unknowingly exposed a high dose of ionizing radiation. In your opinion, what could be went wrong? Why be he exposed to high dose radiation? The source maybe have been in a fault in use of the survey meter, maybe. Or the source may be left unshielded. Maybe the radiographer may not be wearing a dosimeter or may not be paying attention to the alarm threshold. Fatigue, lack of training of a radiographer, or pressure to finish job is quickly. So how can we prevent this? Mandatory training refreshes for all radiography staff using a real-time detector, electronic dosimeters with alarms. Body systems may be using, where two technicians verify safety steps. Procedural checklists or automated source return interlocks could be used for prevent this accidents. In nuclear medicine, radiation protection is not only for the patients. We must also think about people around them, the family members who visit or care for the patient need protection. Medical staffs and other workers must also be protected because they are exposed to regularly to ionizing radiation. And finally, the general public should be kept safe from unnecessary radiation exposure. Medical staff can be exposed to radiation in many different ways. This includes removing radioactive materials from their packing, measuring activity, and moving or storing the radioactive sources, patient examination, management of radioactive waste, or maybe accident may also occur. The purpose of radiation protection is to protect staff and patients from the potential harmful effects of radiation while allowing for beneficial exposure. There are three fundamental principles: justification, optimization, and limitation. Justification says that only do procedures that have a clear benefits. No radiation practice should be allowed unless it is justified. Optimization says that keep exposure as low as reasonably possible by using time, distance, and shielding. Limitation says that permitted dose limits must not be exceeded for both patient and personnel. These are some essential safety equipment required in nuclear medicine departments. These include protective shielding to reduce external exposure, protective clothing to minimize contamination, remote handling tools, forceps, for example, forceps or tongs for manipulating radioactive materials at a safe distance, containers for radioactive waste to ensure secure storage and disposal, alarm dose monitors for real-time radiation dose tracking, contamination monitors for surface and personal monitoring, decontamination kits for emergency response, appropriate signage, labeling, and documentation to support compliance with safety protocols and regulatory requirements. These pictures shows that the practical shielding methods in nuclear medicine and radiopharmaceutical settings, the use of high-density materials such as lead blocks and L blocks shield provides the effective attenuation of ionizing radiation, particularly gamma radiation from unshielded sources. Proper selection of this material and thickness depends on the type and the energy of the emitted radiation. This slide highlights the critical role of the appropriate shielding, particularly of high-energy photon emitters used in nuclear medicine. For example, technetium-99m has 140 keV gamma photons. And to shield this radionuclide, you need 0.26 millimeter lead or 0.17 millimeter tungsten. On the other hand, fluor-18, that using in PET imaging, has 511 keV gamma photons energy, and you have to use thicker shielding material. For example, 4 millimeter lead or 2.8 millimeter tungsten. This is the vial shielding. This lasts significant radiation exposure achieved through the proper shielding for high activity radiopharmaceutical vial. It's the technetium-99m. It has 10 gigabyte activity in 10 milliliter. This generates an external dose rates of approximately 560 millisievert per hour without shielding. If you place inside a 2 millimeter thick lead sheet, the dose rates drops just 1 milligram per hour. This shows why shrink shielding is important. When we use shrink without shielding, the radiation dose to our hands can be very high. So for example, using 2 millimeter tungsten shielding, 22 millisievert, for example, 22 millisievert per hour dose rate reduced to 0.60 millisievert per hour, maybe, or even lower. The use of lead shielding containers and syringe shields is critical at attenuate radiation during the preparation and injection. Personnel should always handle syringes by the plunger, not a needle, to maximize distance and control. Syringes should not be exceeded the volume required, and radioactive materials should be kept to minimum activity necessary to produce safely and effectively. Generator shielding. Generators that produce technetium-99m must always be stored behind the shielding, such as lead bricks or in special lead cabins. When we withdraw the technetium, we should only take the amount of needed for use and store of the rest safely. In radiation safety, also monitoring is very important. There are two main types of monitoring: area monitoring, personal and area monitoring. For personal monitoring, the workers wear dosimeters such as TLD, OSL, or electronic dosimeters. How much radiation they are exposed to. These devices are record the dose over time. For area monitoring, special surveymeters are used to measure radiation levels in workplace. They give real-time readings in units like milliröntgen per hour or millisievert per hour. This helping us if the environment is safe. Radioactive waste in nuclear medicines can be divided into two main groups: solid waste and liquid waste. Solid waste includes things used: radionuclide generators, empty vials, gloves, syringes, calibration source, and materials from the patient treatments. Liquid waste comes from patient urine, leftover radionuclides, or solution used in the lab. Both types of wastes must be carefully collected, stored, and disposed. Radioactive waste must always be stored safely with its proper shielding. In permanent storage area, shielding must be reduced exposure to less than 2 millisievert per hour. In temporary storage area, shielding must reduce exposure to less than 20 millisievert per hour at 1 meter. Waste can be treated as non-radioactive after 10 half-lives. For example, technetium has a technetium-99m has a 6 hours half-life, and so it becomes almost harmless after 60 hours. Radiation areas in nuclear medicine facilities based on the exposure risks and occupational monitoring requirements. Controlled area refers to zone where radiation workers may receive more than 3% of the annual dose limits. These include high activity environments such as hot labs, radiopharmaceutical preparation room, injection room, imaging room, and the treatment or isolation of areas for the radiopharmaceutical patient. Personal dose monitoring is typically mandatory in these areas. It's mandatory. Areas where dose levels may exceed 1/20 but remain 3/10 of the annual limits require environmental radiation monitoring. Even though individual monitoring may not be necessary. Supervised area are locations like patient waiting room, toilets, corridors, where the radiation exposure is minimal. These areas don't require personal dose monitoring, but must still be subjected to environmental surveillance to provide safety. In this area, in radiation areas, clear signs and labels are important, where they warn people about possible dangers and tell them what they must not do. For example, no eating, no drinking, or no smoking in these areas. In this figure, you can see the different radiation symbol. One of this one is the international symbol since 2011. Different radiation symbols are used in worldwide, and they have changed over time. But their goal is the always same: to make people aware radiation hazards. This slide shows how radioactive materials are labeled. Each container must include some important information. The name of radionuclides, for example, technetium-99M, its activity, the volume and concentration, the date and time when it was measured, and a signature of the responsible person. This provides that everyone knows exactly what material they are handling, how activated it is, and when it was prepared. Radioactive contamination, also called radiological pollution. It's the deposition of or presence of radioactive substances on surfaces or within solids, liquids, or gases, where their presence is unintended or undesirable. To reduce the risk of contamination, clean work areas should be established. Good laboratory practices should be implanted. Eating, drinking, and smoking must be prohibited. Also, protective gloves and clothing, personal protective equipment must be used. Also, contamination control is important for us, especially in nuclear medicine when unsealed radioactive sources are routinely handled. The goal is to prevent the spread of radioactive materials, protect personnel, and maintain clean working environments. Every facility handling radiopharmaceuticals must have dedicated spill kits readily available. These kits typically include absorbent pads, gloves, waste bags, signage, tongs, and decontaminating agents. But having a kit is not enough. Just the one kit is not enough. All staff must be trained to use it correctly. The contamination, when contamination occurs, the four surfaces may involve multiple wipe cycles with detergent or specialized solutions. For personnel, protocols include removing contaminated clothing, washing exposed skin, and if needed, internal monitoring and medical follow-up. Always monitor before, during, and after decontamination to assess effectiveness. Routine wipe tests and surveys. Prevention is better than remediation. That's why regular wipe tests are performed to detect removable contamination in hot labs, injection rooms, or the waste storage areas. Typically, results are analyzed using liquid scintillation counter or gamma counters. Additionally, portable survey methods, for example, GM counters or scintillation probes, are used to perform real-time radiation survey. Contamination is monitored using wipe tests, routinely conducted weekly, or survey methods measured at the end of each workday, and results are recorded. If contamination is detected, the contamination is performed based on the type of contamination, low or high dose, and the surface, bench, skin, or others. In the case of the contamination involving short-lived radionuclides, such as technetium-99M, after decontamination procedures, the contaminated area is covered with a thin lead shield, and the activity, date, and time are recorded. The material is then stored in a radioactive waste storage area until it decays to acceptable levels. For cleaning glass surfaces, alkaline detergents should be used. If you have wet contamination, use dry absorbent paper. If you have dry contamination, please use the wet absorbent paper. The area cleans from the outside towards the center, and contaminated paper disposed in plastic bag or container. Monitor the area and repeat the process until the exposure rate is reduced to the specified limits. If the contamination is not successful, mark this area, and the room will remain as a classified as a controlled area until contamination is completely removed. This graph shows that how technetium-99m pertectanate contamination decreases with washing. At the start, the activity is 100%. After the first wash, just the first wash, the activity drops sharply at about 20%. With repeatedly washed 2 to 6 times, the activity becomes almost zero. This is the key point in here. Repeated washing is very effective in removing radioactive contamination. If there is a contamination on skin, the contaminated area should be washed thoroughly with soap and warm water, paying special attention to cleaning under your nails. If this procedure does not reduce the contamination level below the acceptable limits, the process should be repeated using decontamination detergent. Washing can be performed with a nail brush and ensuring that no damage is caused to your skin. For example, consider the patient undergoing iodine 131 therapy. There are the 3 different administration methods. In capsule administration, the capsule should be dispensed from a container with a more than 1 centimeter lead shielding and directly given to the patient. The second one is oral administration. The solutions should be withdrawn from a shielded while using a pipette. In intravenous administration, iodine 131 should be transferred from a shielded syringe to an infusion bottle and administered to the patient. This is an example, a room design for iodine 131. This is the controlled area. The only 1 patient is allowed per room in this area. Surfaces and equipment must be easy to clean. Lead shielding is added to protect the staff and visitors. Warning signs and restricted access are required also. The contamination tools must be available in case of spills. Patient care is done in a way that minimizes radiation exposure to others. This picture is from King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Center. I know there is a, yeah, your hospital. A radiation warning signs and patient information sign must be posted on the door. And during the therapy, protective shielding near the beds, and the floor should be covered with absorbent material with a plastic background. Sorry. How many days a room can be used in between 2 patients? I don't know exactly. 2 days. In these photos, the radiation safety staff are checking for contamination. The left image shows a telephone being covered and monitored for radioactive contamination. The right image it shows a worker scanning the floor with a radiation detector. Both image shows how surface and objects in patient room must be monitored and kept safe. After decontamination, a radiation safe sign should be posted on the door. And patient radioactive waste should be placed in a plastic bag, and the bag should be properly labeled. To summarize, you should be followed when working in nuclear medicine laboratory. Prevent entry and exit unauthorized personnel into laboratory. Before starting work, cover the workbench with plastic sheets and place absorbent paper on top. Wear a laboratory coat and disposable plastic gloves. Used gloves must be removed by turning them inside out to prevent contamination and dispose of the radioactive waste container. Protect eyes against the splashes, and if there are cuts or abrasions on your skin, cover them before starting the work. Monitor hands and feet before leaving the laboratory. Collect broken glassware and shrines in separate containers to prevent injury. Store them appropriately according to the radionuclide type and their potential biological and infectious hazards. Don't keep food, drinks, or personal belongings in the laboratory. Continuously monitor the laboratory in the radiation monitor. During working hours, the radiation monitors must be kept operational at all times, and its alarm threshold should be adjustable. Provide transport containers for radionuclides and keep spill handling equipment and emergency kit available. Emergency procedures must be posted on the visible location. If contamination detected, initiate the contamination procedures immediately. Radiopharmaceutical administration, deletion, and other procedures must be performed inside a fume hood and behind the lead glass shielded. From the activity emitted from the generator, only the amount of required for immediate to use should be brought into the working area. The remainder should be stored in a remote and secure location. Radioactive waste should be transferred to the main waste storage area without excessive accumulation. Care should be taken to prevent contamination of electrical switches, devices, door handles, and telephone receivers. If you pay attention to all these rules, it means that you have taken all the necessary precautions for your health. But unfortunately, the best dose is the one not received. Thank you.